Hello and welcome to the Fairgrounds Arena here in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to UFC 10, the return of the tournament. UFC 10, it is the ultimate test of skill, will, of style, and guile. It is a better event than UFC 9 because, man, that was a stinker. I am the Fighter. Welcome back to Old School MMA Review once again. And let's now have, as the Rolling Stones would say, have Zane Simon introduce himself. Zane, how are you today?
I am doing excellent. It's the UFC. Anything goes. It's unpredictable. We're looking forward to sharing it with you.
This UFC has got a lot of great quotes to start the show off, doesn't it, Zane?
It has a ton, and it has competing statuary of Vulcan, of the Greek god Vulcan and Martin Luther King.
Yeah, this is a strange opening. We'll come back to that opening in 1 second, as we always do, because we always got to talk about the terrible montages that start these shows and the bizarre landmarks that the UFC production team chooses to focus on. But yeah, we're back from UFC 10. We're going to watch the bad taste of UFC 9 at Ramales, which we decided was not the worst event, but it had a lot of stinky stuff involved in it. And thankfully, there's no UFC 9 rematch here at UFC super heavyweight champion, or super fight champion rather, Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock. We're never going to see those two fight ever again, thank God. But unfortunately, we are going to hear from Severn later. Not looking forward to that. But yes, today's date is July 12th, 1996. We're at the Fairgrounds Arena in Birmingham, Alabama, with a live gate of 4,300 fans in attendance and a pay-per-view buy rate of 96,000, which has been steadily dropping over the last few events due to the UFC continuing to be blacklisted off pay-per-view channels. Zane, this UFC 10, I mean, before we get into too much details, does it suck less than UFC 9?
Oh, of course it sucks less than UFC 9. I mean, there are a whole list of diseases that I could write up that suck less than UFC 9.
Let's list them all now, shall we?
That's right.
See, there's leprosy. I think leprosy is better than UFC 9.
Better than UFC 9. Oral herpes might be better than UFC 9.
I'd say it's far above beyond UFC 9, yeah.
Let's see. What else? Meningitis? Meningitis might be better than UFC 9.
I feel like I should have like a Wikipedia page full of deadly diseases now, just go over all of them and see which ones outrank UFC 9.
That's right. Anyway.
Yeah, UFC 9 brings us back the return of the tournament format, because UFC 9, as we know, was the first experiment in single fights. It was not exactly a total fail cat, but it was not too great.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. There's no question. There's no question they looked at that event and said, oh, fuck, that is not something we can do again. We should get back to what was really successful.
And even at UFC 9, they even said UFC 10 would be the return of the tournament format. They knew it was a one-night experiment that would, unbeknownst to them, ultimately go on to be how the format would be changed to. But for now, we're back to tournaments, and we are going to see the tournament format start to change drastically over the course of very few next short events, in fact. But yeah, let's just get right into UFC 10 now. We're back, and I was watching the full pay-per-view version, the original pay-per-view version, which clocks in at just under 2 hours. Zane, which version were you watching today?
I was watching the Fight Pass version, which I assumed would just be the full pay-per-view version, because why wouldn't it be? Why would you cut stuff down for Fight Pass? You've got no limit on the amount of content you can stick in there, but it was only 98 minutes, which means there's 22 minutes of footage missing.
Yeah, as we've noticed in the past when Zane and I have watched, let's say, the original VHS version or DVD version that's on now, which is probably what's on Fight Pass, versus the Silvervision DVDs, which are the British DVDs that were actually recorded from the pay-per-view broadcast legally. There's been tons of stuff they've cut out, and this one is no exemption. Even right from the beginning, I think there's things you don't have. Let's talk let's get right into UFC 10 here. We have our opening video package, which really pushes down our throats returning champion Don Frye, returning runner-up Gary Goodridge, and Mark Hall, everybody's favorite soccer dad.
Yeah, no kidding. That Muay Do just never gets old, and Mark Hall already looks old. So it's an amazing conflict of talent and appearance that just I don't know. Mark Hall he'll always stand out as one of those weird sort of sideshow fighters of the early days where you're just like, I mean, he was better than so many of the other one-off fighters they brought in, but so much worse than a lot of the huge steroid monsters that kind of ruled the day.
And I think that might be what made Hall so interesting to a lot of the viewers, that he wasn't one of the giant roid monsters that we've seen in a lot of the last few events, and we even have one at this event. He was a lot slimmer. He looked a lot more human, I guess, compared to them, and that's probably more attractive to a lot of viewers. And I guess his last few fights, considering also at UFC 9, he broke the nose of Koji Katao in dramatic fashion. So, I mean, I think he's getting a fan base because he has been having good fights, and pretty much, I mean, according to this video package, these are our 3 top new stars.
Yeah, pretty much. And well, I mean, you saw Mark Hall's promo work later. He was a long way from being a star.
Yeah, all these guys cut pretty fantastic promos that I can't wait to talk about. But Zane, I'm sure you took notice of this, as we've noticed, and as we mentioned earlier. Every UFC event begins with a giant influx of landmarks in the Alabama area and whatever event they're in, whatever town they're in. Zane, what was your favorite today?
I think my favorite was the god Vulcan. The focusing on the warrior-like nature of the god Vulcan, and then the peaceful nature of Martin Luther King. I thought this video intro package really went above and beyond by making that by bringing those two landmarks together.
And also, we can't forget Rickwood Field, which I don't even know if that still is there. I don't know what Alabama's like. I've never been there. I've just offended all of our Alabama fans, so I'm sorry, but I don't really know if I am. And yeah, I like how also in the video they keep saying how, like, it's the town on the rise, it's progressive. It's like they're trying to kind of move out of, I guess, their notorious past.
Yeah, and then of course it moves into the fact them trying to sell the glorified barn this event is taking place in as a legit arena. It's like, no, yeah, they have basketball games and rodeos and clan meetings.
We haven't had a lynching since 1976.
It's like just this huge, ugly, miserable barn that they're putting a UFC event in.
Yeah, and I also, I said the attendance rate was 4,300. I actually wonder how accurate that was, because even when they're doing the opening pans going around the arena, there's a lot of empty seats.
Yeah.
You can clearly see there's rows of empty seats, and this is like not even the expensive seats necessarily. These are kind of like the middle range seats. Even those aren't sold out.
Yeah, and it's all like the steel benches too. It's not like actual seating. It's just it's a rodeo barn. That's what it is. I mean, that is what this show is taking place in, and it would it kind of sets the tone for what a lot of the UFC events would take place in over the next 5 years. When you get into like the Wyoming events and the what was it, or East Bay, St. Louis, a lot of those
Yeah,
where they were going to just total nowhere Mississippi and places like that.
I'm from nowhere, Mississippi. You take that back.
No, I refuse.
You monster. Well, our commentators for this rodeo show today are going to be Bruce Beck, as always. He's back, giving us all sorts of gems, as well as Jeff Blatnick. Not joining us this time is Don the Dragon Wilson. Don Wilson is away this time. He is out filming a movie, and that movie he's filming, by the way, I just looked it up, and it is Terminal Rush. That's the movie he was filming while he was away. So this is the movie immediately after The Night Hunter. He's now filming Terminal Rush, rather. Sorry, Terminal Hush would be a better name, but Terminal Rush, which co-starred Michael Anderson Jr. and, ready for this, Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Awesome. That sounds like a failed Mountain Dew flavor spinoff.
Terminal Rush.
I almost would watch it just for Rowdy Roddy Piper, but I have the feeling that They Live is about the height of his career.
I don't know. I mean, according to the poster image for this I'm seeing on IMDb, it's got Rowdy Roddy Piper holding a gun, and he's not wearing like a robber's mask. Instead, he's face painted a robber's mask on himself. So that's pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome. That is pretty legit. Especially if they got like Rowdy Roddy Piper paint like with like a full body paint of a like spandex stealth suit instead of having him in like the burglary, like instead of a cat suit they just paint one on him. That would be hilarious and awesome.
Would you like to know the synopsis of the movie, Zane?
You know what? I have to know it now. I
Okay.
have to.
All right. Johnny Price was a high-ranking officer in the military and a decorated war hero, but after being convicted of a crime he didn't commit, he was dishonorably discharged and has never been able to live down the disgrace. When a band of terrorists seize Hoover Dam and threaten to blow it up if their demands are not met, Prince is called in, or Price rather, I said Prince, but they should have called him Prince anyway. Price is called in and given a shot at redemption as the only man who can fend off the invaders and prevent a disaster that could cost thousands of lives. And
What's the
Prince.
tagline?
Uh, let me open up the poster here and see this wonderful tagline. And by the way, this was filmed in Germany. I think it's filmed in Germany. A national monument held hostage. A forgotten hero rises with a vengeance.
Awesome.
And yes, it is available on DVD.
As all great things should be. So yeah, Don the Dragon Wilson not with us. He would be missed.
Really?
But we got a lovely cycling third man for the night of Tank Abbott, and then later Dan what's his name?
Dan
Damn it,
Severn, the Beast.
Dan Severn, the Beast. And I was shocked. Abbott was not actually terrible as a commentator. Like he started out god awful. And then when it got into actual wrestling and actual technique, he actually had a little bit to offer.
Yeah, I know. I've got a lot to say about Tank later on. I think Tank is a lot smarter than we give him credit for, and
Of course.
we've seen him. Obviously, we know he's smarter than people give him credit for because a lot of people today they think of Tank as he is these days, raving lunatic. But
And it would be hard for him not to be smarter than what people give him credit for. I mean, let's make that clear too.
yeah, I take back the raving lunatic thing also because I actually am a big Tank fan, and watching these old events has made me realize I am a big Tank fan.
Yeah.
These days, no, he's not the Tank out. I guess he's still the same Tank, but he's not the same Tank in the cage. That's the way to put it.
Yeah, you do need he has to have both sides to really exist as that cult figure. Like he can't be I mean the fact that he can't really fight anymore and is occasionally still trying to kind of takes all the joy out of his out of the cage personality.
Yeah, but I really like watching these old events, and I know a lot of fans, newer fans, think Tank is garbage. But you really do got to see these older events to see why he was so popular for so long. But we're going to talk more about Tank later, because there's a lot to say about Tank. Zane, in your version on the Fight Pass, did you see the Jeff Blatnick interview with Don Frye?
I did not. I did not get a special interview with Don Frye and Jeff Blatnick.
Okay, that's actually once Bruce Beck did his opening spiel, he cut over to Jeff, who was interviewing Don Frye, I guess, right before his fight, which or maybe a few minutes before, we don't really know, because Frye was the first fight of the night. But yeah, I mean, Jeff asks his usual line of terrible questions, one of which was ask how it feels to come back as a returning champion, to which Frye says he feels like a trapped dog, and everybody's got their sights set on him, which was a good quote and pretty accurate. And this is also our first little teaser of the new Don Frye, because he's now trying to take on a much bigger personality than was at previous events. A little bit of a pro wrestling persona, if you will.
Yeah.
Because he's also now being trained by Dan Severn.
Yeah, this was really one of the, and yeah, I never really thought about that his training with Dan Severn would probably, for as bad as Dan Severn's pro wrestling personality was, the idea that Severn might, coach him up to be a bit more of a pro wrestling personality as well. Because Frye, in his first UFC appearances, he sounds sane. And I don't mean that as any knock to Don Frye, but nothing that Don Frye has said since UFC 8 has really sounded like sanity. It's always been this knife edge of this whole this survivalist wet dream come personality come to life of I've got to I'm ready for the apocalypse and saying things like I feel like a caged dog trapped in a pen that's much more the Don Frye we've come to know ever since his first UFC event.
And now he's doing Priceline commercials.
Yeah. God, I do not know how that happened.
Luck and a good agent.
Yes.
So yeah, we get our interview with him, and Blatnick also asks him which one does he prefer, the tournament format or the single fight format? Which one do you think he prefers, Zane?
I'd have to say that he's got to love the tournament format, right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. He loves having to fight 3 times in one night. No,
Yeah, no.
no, not at all. No, and that's the dumbest question in the world. I mean, obviously Frye being the showman, being the company guy, he kind of says, I'll fight whatever they want to throw at me, but one night is way better because one fight. It's a lot easier to get ready for one fight than it is to fight 3 times in one night. What a dumb question, and that's not the last time we're going to hear that question either.
Yeah,
we also get another question from Blatnick as well, where he asks him, if you had one more fight left in the UFC, who would you want to fight? And that's like Jeff's question of the night, because he asks everybody that question, and nobody really has an answer to it.
Well, because the only person that's really gotten any consistent push before then is Royce Gracie. Like, he was the champion everyone wanted to fight, and then he's gone. And Ken Shamrock is, not really present at this point either, suddenly. And even Dan Severn is kind of like, flitting back and forth. And so suddenly there's it's like, oh, who do you want to fight? And there's nobody really like standing in the wings waiting. They're not like about to bring Taktarov back or anything like that.
Yeah, and the Gracies, we're not going to see any Gracies back in the octagon for many a year.
No.
Yeah, so it's a dumb question. I doubt you've heard it too many times because I think you missed all those interviews that happened where Blatnick asked that. But he does actually later on. He does mention Royce because he's like trying to feed these guys lines to get them to say something dramatic and newsworthy. But no luck. Nobody wants to answer it. It's not a good question. And that's our lovable Jeff Blatnick.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually one of the more fun parts for me watching these old events is that the commentary up and down is just always terrible.
I do enjoy it. I do. It really is a sign of the times. I do enjoy, as much as I rag on Blatnick and Beck. I mean, I look at it and I wonder like who could actually do a better job. That isn't Tank Abbott. Who could do a better job? And it's really tough to say because in that era, there wasn't much of a standard to go by yet.
No, there wasn't much of a standard, and I mean, it's hard to get through how how inexperienced Frye or how not Frye, but how inexperienced Blatnick and Beck were with all the different martial arts that they were looking at. Like Blatnick was training. He was doing these little oh yeah, I'll go check it out and come to the gym and try, and he was training this stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life, and the TMA guys they'd bring in like Don Wilson and some of the others, they didn't, a lot of what they had to say was just bullshit. It's just kind of this TMA selling your, throat strike or things like that just Wilson would honestly get, he would at least get into some of the more effective, ineffective things, but oftentimes too he'd just get on these terrible narrative tangents where he'd just be like, I don't understand why they're not kicking more, and it's like, well, because they weigh 260 pounds and they have legs that are like little stubby sausages. They're not gonna kick. A wrestler who's been wrestling his whole life is not gonna suddenly start throwing his legs like he's a Taekwondo fighter.
Well, I do remember back when I was first watching these events and watching with my friends, we'd read like the old Black Belt magazines as well. And we'd be like, man, what if James Lacey went into the UFC with his dim mock and his coconut breaking ability? Like, wouldn't he just kill everybody in there? Like, wouldn't that be great to see? So, yeah, the times have changed a lot. We don't believe that hype anymore. Yeah, but hey, well, good news. I mean, Beck's not going to be around for too much longer in the UFC at least, but we still have a few events away before that happens. But he will be eventually replaced. And speaking of replacements as well, we do have a new ring announcer this time.
That's right. He's been there once before, I believe, or was it? Yeah, is this his debut?
I can't remember. I think this is his debut. I'm not positive. I'm trying to remember who was where.
It was actually the because Michael Buffer announced 6 and 7.
Yes.
This was Bruce's Buffer's debut event, and it would not be him all the way on from here on out.
Not yet, no.
but this was his debut event, and boy did that show.
Oh yeah, Bruce Buffer making his debut. Because Rich Goins was the main guy for quite some time, and he was replaced with Michael Buffer. There was also another guy who came in briefly just for one event. He was one and done. He's so memorable, I can't remember his friggin' name.
It was the infamous the
radio DJ from that local
porn
town.
star, Jeremy, Ron Jeremy.
Oh, that's right, Ron Jeremy. Yeah, I remember him now. How can I forget Ron Jeremy?
I know. How can we forget Ron Jeremy?
Yeah, so no more Ron Jeremy, and I'm not going to cut a picture of anything Ron Jeremy related on top of this.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants that.
No, not at all. So Buffer's making his debut. This is many, many years before he does any sort of spinning motions whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't bad, though. I mean, I'm not going to say he was good, but he wasn't bad yet either. He was just very green.
His pitch control was all over the place. He had like, it's time. Sort of like he didn't even do the it's time, but it was like everything was just, he was emphasizing the wrong syllables and asking questions with the expectation and then answering them immediately afterward in place of the audience. Like it was a rough debut. I mean, the signs were there that he could do more and do better. But if you're like a big Bruce Buffer fan, you're not going to get, he didn't come out of the gate a polished product.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, because this was in Bruce's book, I believe his brother was away doing a boxing match, I guess, or something else, and basically Bruce volunteered to jump in and take his place for this one. I don't think he had much experience at this point to begin with. I think he had done a little bit, but not much, and not really on this scale. Obviously, this might have been one of the biggest events he had done, I guess. I don't believe it was his first, but I know it was one of his earliest events doing any kind of announcing. So it worked out for him in the end, and he won't be. This actually is his last one for a few events, but we will see him again, obviously, a lot more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he was I think he was in like some sports-related or insurance-related industry or something like that before, and then he and his brother he and Buffer didn't grow up together or something, and they like started this business suddenly late. Of like he came to it really late, and then found out, and then decided to start this business with his brother, who was obviously the much more well-known and at the time talented announcer. And so, yeah, I mean, whatever he was coming to at this point, I do not think it was much at all in the way of experience.
And overall, I mean, unlike the other announcers we've seen in the past, there's really not much to pick on him with, other than a few nitpicks. Overall, I mean, he actually did a pretty good job. In terms of these early UFCs, if you wanted to rank him with the other announcers, he's definitely up there among the better ones we've had.
Well, he's better than Ron Jeremy, I'm
not saying it's a tough race. I'm just saying he's up there amongst the better ones.
Yeah.
Not a very packed field.
In a race of 3, he's not last.
Yes, precisely. He came in. He probably will be second, maybe. We'll see. Yeah. Let's get on with the show, though. Either way, we had a lot of fights to talk about.
Yeah.
We should mention also our judges for the evening will be Steve Neclia, Michael D. Pasquale Jr., and Mark Denny. Not like it's going to matter.
Steve Neclia did have one of the creepiest held smiles I've ever seen. I don't know if you noticed that.
I had to look
through him for like 20 seconds, and it was just like, Steve Neclia.
That's the face of a man who hangs out at high school gymnasiums way too long.
And of course, Mark Denny is of the Dog Brothers full contact weapon fights, which if you want to look up videos of that online, you should, because it's some scary shit that you will want to stay well away from.
Yeah, I hope newer fans today who watch the sport look up the Dog Brothers, because back in the day, it was pretty awesome to see them go at it. They are innovators of stick fighting. Holy crap, do they just kill each other. It's amazing. You guys got to look up Dog Brothers videos right now. Pause this video, open a new window or tab, and watch Dog Brothers video, then come back to this one and let us know how it is. We'll give you a few seconds. Go ahead. All right, well, that's enough Dog Brothers for now. Yeah, so let's see, what else we have to go over? We have a few, I don't know if they're new rules or not, but just to go over what the rules are again. No major new additions. Just this time for the fights, we have a 12-minute round. with a 3-minute overtime in the opening rounds and semifinals, and the final fight will be 15 minutes with 2 3-minute overtime rounds if needed, and then it'll go to a judge's decision again. They're doing their best not to have any draws and not to have any horrible problems in the last show. I don't remember if this is a new rule or not. You can correct me if you remember, Zane. But the referee does have the ability to restart a fight now. I don't think that's new.
That's not a new rule. That's been around for a little while.
Okay, I think they were just stressing it a little bit more because of what happened at the last event. So
yeah.
I feel like they were stressing it a little bit more just to remind people that we're not going to let what happened last time happen again.
Yeah. They're definitely, I mean, everything is designed, and the shorter time limits, everything is being designed to prevent UFC 9.
Yeah, we're really starting to streamline things in a much better fashion, and no more of this 30-minute super fight garbage ever again. That's never going to happen again.
Yeah, no, and thank God.
We also had 2 preliminary fights for alternates in case of an injury during this event. Zane, do you want to run down our alternate fights?
Well, Sam Adkins stopped. He of the Zubas fame stopped Felix Mitchell, who was most well known for being the first guy to ever wear gloves into the octagon, although he took them off immediately.
Yes.
Upon entering it.
And was he the Grasshopper? Was his nickname? I think.
I think so, Felix the Grasshopper Mitchell, and then Geza Kalman, who was very briefly a WWF jobber. And had a long pro wrestling career on the Canadian mixed martial arts circuit, or the Canadian pro wrestling circuit. And he beat Duselberto, who is really famous for being Andre Berto's father. Andre Berto being the WBC welterweight title holder in late 01s.
Which
Or
is
the late knots, as it were.
Yes, the late aughts. That's a good way to put it.
Late aughts, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice little piece of history there to see him in there. See that there was that combat sports lineage, but unfortunately Berto did lose pretty badly. Coleman, who came in, by the way, that's the fight I did have a chance to see. I didn't see Atkins' fight, although I actually did want to see that one. I did want to see Atkins and Mitchell go at it, but I couldn't find that one. But Berto and Coleman's got like this. You can tell he's a pro wrestler when you see it. He's got this bizarre haircut. He's like practically entirely bald fronts that go about as far as like here, and they're very tiny, small little spikes. He's got a singlet on that's half black, half white, and it says "Big Dog" on the front, and on the back it's got a Canadian maple leaf. It's all over the place. It's an amazing singlet. You guys got to see it if you can find that. And fight itself wasn't too bad actually, but Berto pretty much got dominated, and Coleman won that by a TKO, I believe it was. It was a referee stoppage. And also another little quick tidbit about that too, because I did see this. There was a different referee. Now, Big John McCarthy is back. He's for the whole main card. We're seeing him again. He is our referee. But Joe Hamilton was actually the referee for the alternate bouts. So there you go, another referee who was there besides Big John.
Yeah, not Timok this time.
Yeah, I missed Timok, but I guess I brought in someone who might be more suited to this job and not jumping around the cage trying to get camera time.
Poor Timok, not good enough to act, not good enough to ref, not good enough to fight. That's a tough niche in the history of martial arts right there.
Timok's actually going to be at a Comic Con coming up here in New York. He's going to be at Eternal Con. Free plug for Eternal Con. And I'm going to hopefully go there. I'm going to try and catch him for an interview. I want to see if he has any memories about his time in the UFC as referee. So if he does, you'll obviously be hearing back. And if he doesn't, well, pretend you never saw this video.
Yeah. Much like the UFC, a future plug for something that may or may not actually happen.
I feel like I'm SEG all over again.
So yeah, after that, we jumped right into bout 1, which was Mark Hall versus Don Frye.
That's right, yeah, we get our entrances. I thought Mark Hall, I have a note here, I thought Mark Hall looked like he just got out of bed in his oversized tank top and his boxer briefs.
Yeah, like I said, he always, I mean, like, if you saw him out, like, doing slow pitch softball on the weekends with the cooler of beer, he would not look out of place at all. Like, he looks like somebody he looks like your neighbor. It looks like your neighbor's going out to fight in the UFC and wail on some dude.
I think before he went to the event, he was probably coaching a 4 to 6 year old t-ball game. Then he decided, I better go over to the fights.
Yeah, that's pretty much, he ran the minivan over to the arena and grabbed his best tank top and rolled up into the octagon.
And as is a new tradition for this UFC event, we get some interviews with the fighters beforehand, as we've always had. But this time around, they're just some of the worst interviews we've had. And Mark Hall, I didn't even bother.
Bad.
Yeah, Zane's already groaning over there. I didn't bother to actually even write Hall's down, but he basically just stuttered and stumbled through like a 20-second interview. That was just the worst.
It looked like they drove all the fighters over to the local graduation photo guy who like does the high school graduation photos and had them all just like wrote out cue cards on the spot and had them all read the cue cards for the promos like half an hour before the event.
Yeah, they did feel pretty generic for the most part. The guys who weren't, obviously not like, Frye and Goodridge, but they mostly felt like they were just reading stuff off, or they were being told lines to say. It really came off that way.
It was god awful, and it was terrible. It felt like they gave Mark Hall a prepared statement to read, like for a court hearing or something. It was bad.
But luckily, we were saved by Don Frye's promo, which I wrote down, and he says, and again now, keep in mind, this is now Don Frye accompanied by his manager, Mr. Fuji. I mean, Dan Severn, who's now helping him. Or it's Gary Hart. Actually, that'd be better. He needs Gary Hart, so they all have mustaches. Like, they should have Gary Hart manage them all, so they all have mustaches, mustache trio or something. That's some old school wrestling right there. Not Jimmy Hart. I want Gary Hart, because Gary Hart was the better of the managers.
There you go. Yeah, it was. Frye is obvious. Like I say, he was kind of sane at UFC 8. He was very much like, oh, I just can't wait to get back to my family. I want to say hi to my wife. Thank you, everybody, for supporting me. Suddenly here, he's just like crazy pants, Don Frye.
Did you write it down, or do you want me to do it?
I wrote it down, but you can do it.
I feel like you should. You got the mustache. I think you should be the one that does it.
All right. I'm not here to say hi to anybody. I'm not at rest. I'm not at peace. And when I go into the octagon, lock up your woman and children, because all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah, that is amazing. You actually, I think you missed a line there. I have it as I'm not at rest. I'm not at peace. I have a real bad attitude. When I go into the octagon, lock up your women and children, because all hell is going to break loose.
I might have missed the line.
It's okay. He said a lot of bullshit. He basically took like 4 different pro wrestling promos and squeezed them into one long run-on sentence.
Because it was funny, like, I was writing it down as I was listening to it, and the first thing I said is, like, Frye is way better on the mic than Mark Hall. And then it got to the lock up your women and children. It's like, well, maybe he's not way better. Maybe that would have been better left off. Lock up your women and children when I go outside.
Yeah, it was a very confusing promo, because I don't really know what his personality is supposed to be. If he was a pro wrestler, I wouldn't know what he is. I couldn't tell if he was a good guy or a bad guy, because he says all these different things. He's saying it with a smile, but he's telling you to lock up your women and children because he's going to come and rape and pillage your town. Like, I don't get that.
Yeah, it was legitimately like I can't even imagine a fighter cutting that promo today of like, lock up your women and children because I'm coming to fight.
I would not want to have that kind of a guy in the cage at all. That guy belongs behind. He belongs in a different cage, the one with metal bar. He belongs in jail. I'm trying to say.
Did you catch the great like bit of selling that they tried to do of Frye's personality right after that, where they talked about him wanting to stay angry and using his dead dog, like his recently killed dog, as motivation?
That is some weak motivation right there. His dead puppy. That is sad, but it's not. What he's like mentally picturing Mark Hall kicking his dead puppy down the road or something?
I don't know. I don't know how. Yeah, it was just that was too weird right there. It was just hit like he's holding on to his anger by remembering his dead dog. It's like, seriously, that's kind of disturbed.
Yeah, so let's get into the fight now, because it's been like half an hour. We haven't even talked about one fight, other than the prelims, which we didn't really mention that much. But yeah, our fight begins, and Mark Hall shows off his Muay Do and hits a spinning back kick right into Frye's solar plexus. That was actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, except then that it like triggered a Don Frye rage fit, and he just went and totally fucked Mark Hall over for the
Yeah,
next 15 minutes. It was good except for that.
yeah. Don Frye smash.
Seriously, like that fight, like Hall hit that nice little spin kick, and then Frye just threw him down and beat his ribs until they were red and bloody.
Yeah, the commentators were saying how Hall had a special move he'd been working on, and they pretty much said that was the move. But again, like it didn't matter once Frye grabbed him, picked him up, body lock takedown, slammed him to the ground, and just destroyed his ribs. It was a pretty bad beating. I think one of the worst rib beatings we've seen yet. So we haven't really seen a lot of them yet, but it's definitely one of the worst ones because they got red really quick. It was not pretty.
And of course, it also highlighted how silly, like, it immediately highlighted Blatnick's commentary where, and I don't know why he did this, but he did it a lot early, where he had, like, no faith and no belief that ground striking could hurt. And so every time, like, here's Frye just, like, slaughtering Hall to the body, just pounding on him, and Blatnick's going, oh, those aren't doing much damage out there. Those are some pretty weak arm punches he's hitting from the top. Nothing to worry about right now.
Yeah, and that's really the wrong kind of commentating you want. That kind of reminds me of like old WCW commentating when they were like watching hardcore matches, and they'd be like, oh, he hit him with a garbage can. Now, those don't really hurt. They just make a lot of noise. But he hit him hard with that in the head. It's like that's like the equivalent of it from pro wrestling. It's you're downplaying the actual ability to fight, and I don't know why he's even thinking that. I mean, I know we mentioned earlier Bladnick has gone on a train with a lot of these guys to help learn more about the events, but it's one thing to be in there and training and have somebody kind of pitter patter on your ribs just so you get an idea to not stay in one position. It's quite different when you're in the ring and you've got Don Frye ground and pounding you.
Yeah, I mean, and like, because we got to say, not a whole shitload happened in this fight. Not much happened. It just kind of was Don Frye being a monster and way bigger and stronger and better than Mark Hall and beating him to a pulp for like 12 minutes.
Yeah, it was a long match, and during most of the match also, I have Blatnick saying he kept basically telling Mark Hall to start kicking Frye in the leg. He was very big on it. He wanted him to start hitting him in the leg.
Yeah.
Or rather, I can't
elbow him.
He wanted Frye to elbow his leg because Frye was in the guard. So he wanted him to start doing this to his leg. And I mean, I guess he's thinking of passing a guard, but why do that when you can just go for the ribs because he's in a better position for that anyway? He kept insisting on him elbowing his thigh. Yeah,
it's like some really weird TMA stuff right there. Some like, go for his pressure points. You gotta like elbow, give him a Charlie horse, elbow the thigh when you can punch him in the liver. Charlie horse him.
Yeah, he was pretty big on the Charlie horses for whatever reason. And adding on to the bizarreness of that, I don't know if you heard it at one point, but Hall's corner at one point told him to start hitting Frye in the groin with his heel.
I did not hear that. I missed the groin to heel commentary. But did you? I did hear Hall respond to that. Did you hear that?
What did he say? I don't remember.
He just turned to his corner and screamed, "Shut up!"
I did catch that. I was wondering who he was talking to.
He was just screaming in his corner to stop talking to him.
Because their coaching was awful. So I think that probably was his guys telling him to hit him in the groin, which it would have made no sense. Also, it's like he's in full guard. How is he's gonna like reach around and put a heel in the groin?
Give him a reach around.
Bad choice of words for this event.
Oh no! But and the other thing I noticed, that this was my favorite comment of the whole fight from Blatnick, which was like, where you talked about like why it was, I think it was even in response to what Frye was doing. I think when they pulled, I don't even know what it was from, but I like what it was in reference to, but Blatnick said you can go out, punch once, miss, and end up breaking your ankle. So you have to think ahead.
Yeah, I think that was when Frye was grounded and pounding him. And he said something pretty dumb like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like, it was in response to, I think it was like, to don't punch yourself out. Like, anything can happen out there, so you have to think ahead. Like that. somehow this imaginary scenario he set up where you punch once, break your ankle, is something that you should be like you could help game plan around.
We all really know what Blatnick wants. He just wants them to start wrestling. That's pretty much all he wants.
Yeah. And then once and of course after the fight is finally, and I don't even know what prompted McCarthy to stop it, if it was that the round time came up or what. But Hall, it was one of those things where it was like you didn't see anything obvious in the fight where it was like a fight-ending blow, but once he had to like drag Hall up to his feet like a child, you could tell that it was time for that fight to be stopped.
Yeah, I did notice a lot of rather quickish stoppages. Pretty much once somebody got into a bad position and they started punching them really hard, fights were stopped generally very quick, with the exception of I think like one of the later fights. I think the main event actually. But yeah, like a lot of the earlier fights, they were really trying to prevent a lot of serious damage because, again, I think this is during the pre-Dark Ages, so they're trying to be a lot safer. I also think this actually was the first event where the fighters all were wearing gloves. Because I think at UFC 9, some guys chose to wear them. I know Severn did, but Shamrock didn't, a lot of other guys didn't. I think this was the first one where everybody wore gloves.
No, Hall wasn't.
Hall wasn't, okay.
Yeah, I think after that, everyone else might have been, but Hall wasn't.
Okay, yeah, I know we're starting to see him, so at the very least, we're getting a lot more safety precautions. And I think these rather quick stoppages, for instance, once someone started to unload, even just a few punches that went unprotected, they were going to stop it really quick. And I think it's what happened a lot at this show.
Well, and it was a lot of it was fighters tapping out quickly. So it may have been that they were instructed to tap out. Like if you get in trouble and you start getting hit hard, you should tap because we don't want to get known as a blood sport.
Yeah, if these guys are fighters, they're not going to tap out easy. If you guys did, but it's hard to get that kind of to knock off your pride to tap out like that quickly.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I mean because I mean one of the early stoppages they really ragged on, which was the Campetella fight, which we'll get to later. It didn't look like it that much, but they did even go back and say that Campetella did tap out after those few strikes from Coleman, or from was it Coleman? No, it was Goodridge.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one, but yeah,
anyway.
There were a lot of quick finishes in that regard. I guess not quick finishes in terms of match length, but quick in terms of how sudden they happened.
Yeah, definitely there were a lot of weird fight ends. Definitely things where you're just like, I guess it makes sense that it ended, but it just the fight just stopped. Like that was, I think, this event was probably more known for than anything. Like watching it would be just how weird there were so many weird endings where just the fight just ends. Like not a knockout, not a cut, not any submission of any at all. It just stopped.
Yeah, and I feel like that probably is just because the whole, like you mentioned, also the trying to prevent it from becoming a bloodbath kind of sport, because they're trying to get themselves a better name and get back a lot of their lost pay-per-view companies. So that's our theory, I guess, on what may have caused that. You guys can agree or disagree on it, but that's what we're thinking, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that's all I can think. I mean, yeah, it's weird because there definitely were some guys that just kind of went down, and the moment they went down, they tapped out.
Yeah, and eventually, so let's get to the finish then, because like you mentioned, I mean, Frye just dominates the whole fight. Besides that spinning back kick to the ribs, but other than that, total domination, and Frye gets the TKO win at according to their UFC graphic at 10:23, but Wikipedia has it at 10:21 for some reason. Just a weird little note there.
Yeah, that is weird. Maybe just a mistranscription. Unless Sherdog has it different too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Just a weird little thing I noticed when I was looking up the event results and all that stuff, and just a small little thing. It doesn't make a big difference, but just a bizarre thing. I don't know. Maybe the UFC got it wrong, but who knows?
Sherdog has it different too, so it was probably misreported by the UFC during their broadcast.
Okay,
so because the official or the timer on screen isn't the official timer.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah.
The official timer was recorded in at 10:21. That's one of those weird things that always comes up when you get to fastest knockouts ever. Is that the timer that you see on the screen isn't actually the official round timer. It's just a graphic to help you along.
How confusing and bizarre.
Yeah. Which is why they also cut it off. Like they stopped showing it when there's about 15 seconds left. Is because if they showed it all the way through, you'd see that it doesn't line up.
Learn something every day, folks. Learn something new every day.
So yeah, after that, I don't know. Was there much in the way between fights? It just kind of felt like they jumped straight to the next one, from what I saw.
I had nothing in between. I had some stuff. I had some filler later on, which I doubt you had.
Yeah.
But no, for the opening rounds, we just go fight to fight, and that brings us to our second match, the opening rounds, which is Brian Johnston taking on Scott Feedler.
Yep, and Feedler looked like a carnival boxer. That was I would not be at all surprised if that's what he was. He looked like a guy they pulled off like the local carnival boxing circuit, you know?
Do we have any information on Feedler, or is he just an enigma to us?
Let's see. What they said on there was that he had a karate background where he trained in a bunch of different styles of karate, and that he was discharged from the Marines, which all peg him as pure crazy. And other than that, I'm not sure that I have a lot of info on Scott Feedler, honestly.
No, I don't have much either. I just know they were kind of billing it as like a striker versus striker match, which was interesting. It didn't really turn out that way.
No.
Brian Johnston.
Brian Johnston's one of those early, like, super legit guys that just kind of got forgotten about in the annals of MMA history, you know?
Yeah, which is too bad. I mean, I also think, I wrote down one of his quotes. I think Brian Johnston might be our first UFC fighter to actually make a Bruce Lee quote as part of their package.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually. What was his quote?
Well, basically, he just said, he believed in Bruce Lee's way of having no way as a way.
Oh, yeah.
That was about it. So I think that was the first time we actually heard a Bruce Lee reference in the cage.
That may be. It's definitely. I mean, Johnson. Like I say, Johnson was kind of one of those guys that, I mean, he went on to be like a trainer at AKA for a while, and worked with them for a long time. And I think he got. Was it a stroke? I want to say like his career was cut short by some pretty bad medical thing. It may have been a stroke, where he was just like just kind of cut down suddenly.
Yeah, I'm not too sure actually. If anybody out there knows what happened to Brian Johnston, you can let us know in the comments section. And just to also clarify too, because I know we did have, I believe, one Jeet Kune Do fighter or someone similar to Jeet Kune Do in the UFC in the past, but I don't think they really mentioned Bruce Lee in this capacity. And I'm sure we're going to hear it a lot more over the future. And you mentioned AKA also, and I think this is also the first time we've actually seen Javier Mendez as well.
Yeah. Like I say, you're getting into the AKA. Some of these first early super camps. It's like how one of the last event, I believe you saw Nova Uniao for the first time.
Yeah, so now we see Nova Uniao. We're seeing the early stages of AKA with Javier Mendez, although they do mention Javier later on, and Blatnick, of course, mispronounces his name and calls him Xavier Mendez, so Professor X in the American Kickboxing Academy.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of these super camps that have been out there have been around forever. Like, you just, starting out in their earliest iterations before you would have ever thought possible.
I have someone here. I don't. Let's see. I think it was Johnson who said this, but he also said. I think correct me if I'm wrong. It was either Johnson or Feedler, but I know one of them said, "I didn't come here to talk tonight. I came to fight." And then they immediately cut out of the package and back to the entrance. Did you catch who said that?
I think that was Johnston.
Yeah. Okay.
Feedler had the "I hope I don't disappoint everyone." That was his big quote.
That's a classic one. I love those guys who come in like, "I don't want to make anybody disappointed in me," and that's my stapler. I like those guys. I like those promos. Those are good promos.
And yeah, but it should also be noted that Feedler, much like Geza Kalman, but on a main card, should go down in history with one of the UFC's worst hairstyles of all the time.
It was pretty. I mean, I don't know. You got to really see Geza Kalman's because his was pretty out there.
His was pretty bad, but Feedler's was something that I think even Vitor Belfort would be ashamed to wear in the cage. and that's saying something.
That is really saying something.
It was basically a skullet, and I think he had it braided. I think it was a braided skullet.
Yeah, he's the fighting monk Scott Feedler.
Nice.
It's like a Diablo 3 character. He's like a
A Diablo 3 character on the skids, maybe.
yeah.
A Diablo 3 character who's been through some hard times.
And yeah, so this fight itself, though, was actually a very good fight. Actually, very exciting, very short, but very action-packed. We get Brian Johnston showing off his judo right away, and I believe they also mentioned that Johnston has trained with Mark Swain.
Yeah.
Mike Swain, rather. Whatever the Swain dude is. Like, for some reason, I'm suddenly blanking on his first name, but yeah, he throws him right away. They get up. I mean, they actually do a lot of grappling. They go for leg locks on each other. They take each other's backs. It's a very exciting 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, it was it's one of the few times, outside of like Rousey or the few other really great judokas you see in MMA, that kind of hip toss has ever worked, and then Johnson immediately tries it again and fails at it miserably and gets his back taken. And it's just one of those things that if Feedler had any more skill, he probably could have made something out of that. But Johnson did a good job to shuck him off and get on top and just, at that point, pound him out.
Yeah, just took his back and just pounded him out for the TKO at 225. I believe I have it listed as in the first round.
Yep.
Which is, I believe, it might be that. I think that's actually the fastest. No, it's not the fastest fight, but it's the second fastest fight of the night, I believe.
Yeah, it was a good quick one, and Feedler just after the loss, Feedler just, especially with his whole I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I think he had to be drugged back to the arm raise thing by McCarthy. He looked pretty shattered.
He was out of it, but it was a great fight. It was a very good fight for Brian Johnston. He comes out of it looking very good, and he's right away out of this fight, he's like a new prospect to start looking out for, who unfortunately doesn't really go on to do as much as we would have liked him to do, but in the long run. But here, he looks really great, and a new star has been born, perhaps.
Yeah, it was a tough. He came into MMA in a really tough era, and like I said, I did look it up. He did have a stroke. You're talking he fought in 1996 and 1997, and then had a stroke, and that's it. What can you do about that? It's a tough story. He's kind of, like I say, he's kind of one of those guys who was a very talented fighter, really had a lot of physical tools, and just didn't win a bunch when he fought in his early days, but then went away really quickly.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate way to go out also. So, yeah, but at least either way here, he comes out looking really good. He moves on to the next round, and he's got himself Don Frye in the next round. So that's going to be a tough fight to look at, a tough fight to look forward to. But let's move on now to our next match, our third fight of the evening. We have the two debuting fighters. We have Modi
Hammer versus Hammer. I'm excited because it's the Hammer versus the Hammer. Neither of them are the first Hammer in the octagon, though. Do you remember who the first Hammer was? You've got to remember. It happens every show.
Jeez, I'm trying to think back now. Who was the first Hammer? Who was it, Zane?
Andy Anderson.
Oh, yeah, I've been trying to repress him. Sorry.
Every show, we've got to remember Andy Anderson.
Never forget Andy Anderson.
Never forget. Never forget the meth-dealing, possibly racist biker who's in prison.
And Night Hunter just because.
But yes, Andy Anderson was our first Hammer, and this is our second and third, and our first hammer-to-hammer matchup.
That's a lot of hammer-on-hammer action.
It is. But Hornstein, I couldn't help noticing that he looked a remarkable amount like Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes, absolutely. I think I remember them mentioning that somewhere in the commentary about that. But yeah, he's like a Van Damme look-alike. It's insane how close they look to each other.
Yeah. Van Damme look-alike. They keep, and this is one thing I was unclear about, is they keep pushing him with this karate background, but they then talk about his style as survival. And, everything else about him suggests that he was a longtime Krav Maga guy, so I really have no idea. I mean, I'm sure he did karate too, but it seemed like Krav Maga was really kind of his thing.
Yeah, I think he was a full contact karate guy, and he also did Krav Maga, but I don't think they wanted to mention that as a style, because if you really look at this, they weren't really mentioning styles throughout the whole event for the most part, other than like wrestling or kickboxing or whatever you want to do. They were really downplaying all those styles now. They're trying to maybe streamline and focus so that fans can easily understand what they're going to see more so.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, they definitely mentioned them still, but you're right. It was no longer quite as much emphasis on the style versus like the style versus style was just down to like striker versus striker or grappler versus striker or wrestler versus grappler kind of thing.
It wasn't as good as UFC 2 when they had you could have grapplers versus exotics. I missed that.
Oh yeah, we need our exotics back.
Yeah, I mean Mark Hall would fall under the exotics, and I guess so would Buddy Hornstein.
That is probably the first time that anyone has ever described Mark Hall as exotic.
He's an exotic soccer dad.
So yeah, basically Mark Coleman fights Jean-Claude Van Damme, and this was Coleman's first MMA fight, I believe, ever.
Yes, this is his debut. In his corner, by the way, you'll notice was Richard Hamilton, who used to be in Don Frye and Dan Severn's corner.
Yep, that's one of those camps. Like I feel like. Well, I mean, I guess it probably became. Did it become Hammer House?
I thought Hammer House was just a random gymnasium in Columbus, so I don't know if it was the Hammer House or not.
Yeah, because I mean, it seemed kind of weird that was like it felt like the start of a super camp that you never really doesn't hold in the same way that a lot of the early super camps that we remember do.
Yeah, Hamilton, I guess, yeah, well, he was obviously there with a lot of the best guys in the time. I don't really know what exactly. I'll have to look up a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he was pretty much a trainer to like the top dudes at the time, especially for striking. Guys who were wrestling, trying to make the transition into grappling. He was the guy who was going to.
Yeah. So yeah, Coleman comes in, they were, he came in with this very, very much a pedigreed fighter where they knew to talk about him as the probable winner of the whole tournament, which was kind of interesting considering, like, most, because otherwise, you didn't really get that before. Usually just be like, oh, he's huge, he might win. But Coleman, it was very much like, this is a pedigreed blue chip prospect fighter. We expect him to win everything.
Yeah, he comes off kind of looking like the second coming of Dan Severn. He's big, he's stronger, he's bigger, he lacks the mustache power, but he seems to have better skills than Severn, I'd say.
Yeah.
He was really made for this kind of event, and it was a pretty good short fight, but a pretty good fight.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Hornstein came out looking like, he actually had some traditional martial arts skills that would be applicable in a fight. Like, he actually threw some kicks and punches and tried to get something done, but then, Coleman is just like this Leviathan sort of figure rising out of the deep and just, throwing Hornstein to the ground and engulfing him. And that was pretty much the fight. That's a good way to put
it. I like that. It's a very biblical way to describe that fight.
Because, yeah, I mean, it was so, like, it was such a hilarious thing, like, Coleman, obviously, and this is why he gets this, like, moniker as the godfather of ground and pound, was because he was one of the first guys to really be able to, like, fire off really brutally hard headshots while in somebody's guard or getting side control and getting half guard and all these different things and just consistently punishing people. But he threw like three hard right hands, and Bruce Beck says, "Oh, 3 right hands. Usually that's something only boxers can do." like some part of Coleman's great ground and pound skill was because he was a technical striker.
So despite Bruce Beck having been part of 11 UFC events total now, including the Ultimate, still has no idea how striking works.
Yeah. Still has no idea that Coleman is basically just, unleashing what is very likely a great deal of roid rage on a poor Krav Maga instructor.
Yeah, Coleman looked huge. He wasn't as roidy as the guy in the next fight, but he was. I mean, as far as I was told that they actually did drug test back in the day, but I've got nothing to really substantiate that. But I was told they actually, the early SEG did drug test on their own. But again, it wasn't really a thing that anybody covered back in the time, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say how in depth they were also. But we'll talk about that in the next fight. I feel like a lot more. But I did like how in this fight, I don't know if you call that in the very first opening moments, how Modi throws a kick and Coleman ducks it really skillfully. And he goes for the single leg. Modi actually avoids the single leg takedown, but then when they get back to standing, they both just kind of fall over. It was kind of weird. It's like he managed to get away from like the serious good attack, and then they just kind of fell down.
Yeah, that happens a lot in some of these early UFCs. Definitely, it's just I mean these guys are so huge and there's so little footwork in what they do. Like really like the wrestlers had wrestling footwork, but most of the strikers didn't have any of the basic striking footwork that you would need to be like survive against wrestling. And so a lot of times it's just like two huge dudes crashing into each other and then falling down.
Which is a pretty great highlight. I feel like that should be in his Coleman's highlight reel.
And yeah, so afterward Coleman is like fuming in the cage after he won, just with that like glaring, sort of shell shock of that he kind of became notorious for.
Yeah, he goes into that hammer trance. I don't know how we're gonna coin that term.
Hammer trance.
It's hammer time. Do the hammer trance.
Don't hurt him, Hammer. And that was it. I mean, that was the fight.
Yeah, 2 minutes, 43 seconds. Coleman gets the win. He's victorious in his first ever fight, and he looks like a friggin' monster, and it's only going to get worse from here because he keeps on smashing things.
Yep. And then we once again, we don't have much transition, right? I mean, I don't know if I missed
No, it goes right to the next fight. There was no breaks in between. They just went from fight to fight.
So we get the biggest bicep fight in the world, as it was coined. Gary Goodridge versus John Campetella.
This is like Hulk Hogan versus Tony Atlas, two enormous bicep-y men.
Or they pitched it through their personal heroes in the cage. Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I caught that. That was one of the dumbest things they've ever said in the commentary. I couldn't believe what were they trying to say? Like, what was the point of that one?
I don't know. It was just like.
And that was Blatnick too, of course, wasn't it?
I think it was.
I don't think Beck would say anything that offensive, so it must have been Blatnick.
They were trying to pitch who these guys' personal heroes were, and for Campetella, they're like Campetella, these guys, Campetella's personal heroes are Arnold Schwarzenegger and somebody I can't remember who the other one was, and Gary Goodridge, Martin Luther King. But just the way it came off was like trying to pitch this as a fight between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Martin Luther King.
Would you pay money to see that fight?
If I say yes, will I be a bad person?
I don't know. I think just having this conversation makes us both bad people.
Okay, well, if there's no going back, then sure.
And there goes most of our viewers. Okay, well, whoever's still left here, we have Gary Goodridge making his return. He had a very tough time at UFC 9. He lost to Mark Schultz, and now he's back, and he's going up against John Campetella, who is
a black belt in Vada Kempo.
He's a New York boy. He's a Staten Islander who teaches science, I think it was, in Brooklyn, and he appears to be a routine steroid abuser because, man, his back knee was off the wall.
Yeah, dude was ripped in a way that you just can't get ripped. It's like a skinny guy wearing a muscle suit.
It looked that way. The way he walked around with his turtle belly popping out, and he didn't look real. Nothing about him looked real. He looked more like a pro wrestler than any other pro wrestlers we've had on the event so far.
Yeah. And I did notice that they ended up bringing it up. I think it was like one of those things where Bruce Buffer wasn't on the same page as the commentary booth and probably the promotional end of things, where like we talked about them ignoring some of the credentials and all that, where like they noticeably did not bring up Goodrich's Kuksul Wan black belt as he was walking out and in his little intro package, but then Buffer brought it up in the intro.
Yeah, they were actually more focused this time around on arm wrestling than they were his actual legit skills. We first know his Cook Salon was non-existent, but at least for a while they were trying to pretend it was. Now they're just straight up saying he's an arm wrestler.
But they gave him a second-degree black belt in cross-training.
How do you get a second-degree black belt when he barely even had a first-degree white belt in Cook Salon?
I don't know. I don't know how. Yeah, I think Gary Goodridge. I mean, more than anyone else, I think early on he really had his eye on the self-promotion part of this.
He was a smart guy, and he also had some of the better promos as well. He knew how to actually work the mic to an extent for this era. That's really.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm like degrading him a little bit, but no, I mean he really was one of the guys who was trying to have a personality early on, trying to make himself marketable beyond the UFC, because you're not going to fight forever. Although Goodridge proved us wrong almost, but.
Yeah.
You're not gonna fight forever, and yeah.
So he cut a great promo for this fight. It was awesome, and it was, you know what? Big Daddy has been accused of a lot of things. Nice guy trying to be mean guy trying to be nice. You decide for yourself. Tough talk's over. It's time to get nasty.
Oh my, yeah. I love Goodridge's promos. They're like the highlights of any of these UFC events that he's in.
They really are. He always had great promos, especially because there seemed to be this small conflict of him not wanting to be like come off as a really mean dude. So it was always like, I'm here to get nasty, but I'm not a bad person, so don't hate me.
Yeah, it's very conflicted personality. I know like Vladik at one point said how he said Gary likes to consider himself a gentle giant, but I believe otherwise.
Yeah. Seriously. Oh, and did you get them pitching Campetella's high school cred in there?
Yeah, is the teacher or whatever?
No, from where he went to high school.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember. I didn't write it down. I remember them saying something. He was like from the same high school as someone else, right, or something like that.
He was from Lincoln High School, the same high school as Lou Gossett Jr. and Marv Albert.
Nice.
Save your fight cred for John Campetella.
So to me, then that makes this fight Lou Gossett versus
versus Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
And we're going to hell. Good night, America. But the fight itself, let's get into the fight before we lose any more viewers, because we're quickly losing all of them. Let's get back to the fights. And the fight itself starts off pretty good. Campatella actually gets a gorgeous-looking fireman's carry on Goodridge.
Yeah, he,
Campatella couldn't do at UFC 8.
Yeah, Campetella started out, he actually showed some, I don't even know if it was any of his karate, it was just a brawl, and he was big enough and strong enough, and Goodridge, I mean, we can't pretend that for all of the kickboxing and the immense amount of years Goodridge spent in MMA, he was never much more than a brawler. And so the fact that he was fighting somebody who was also a brawler and just as strong as him really took a lot of his skill away. Yeah, it was pretty amazing actually seeing Goodridge be overpowered. I mean, we saw a little bit less fight he had against Schultz, where Schultz was manhandling him, but that's because he had a different set of skills. This time around, he had a guy that was physically, as big as him, mass-wise and everything, and he was just like, again, that fireman's carry was way better than what Paul Herrera even attempted to do. He was, and Campetella was able to really kind of force Goodridge around the cage wherever he wanted him to be. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the cage and for cage grabbing, it's really hard to say that Goodridge would have won this fight. Yeah, I mean, Gary got lucky there. I mean, he basically eventually pulled guard and kept Campetella really tight to him. And then he just was able to grab the cage, pull himself over, flip him over because of that, and just start punching him. And yeah, I mean, that cage, being able to hold that fence was an amazing thing. And that just kind of shows Goodridge is in there. He's thinking. He's not really trying to be as crazy of a brawler as he previously had been. He's been, and really this whole event when he fights, it shows he's been thinking a lot more. He uses the cage to his advantage in a lot of very clever ways that we haven't really seen. Yeah. People grab the cage, but not to the extent that Gary's going to grab the cage in this event. Yeah, no, I honestly wonder if Gary Goodridge was the reason that they eventually had the no cage grabbing rule. Well, I believe so, because I think actually at UFC 11, I think that rule is in effect. So I think it's because this, and we'll talk about that in a few more minutes. But I think actually UFC 11, that rule did come into effect. There was no more fence grabbing. If it wasn't UFC 11, it was definitely the second Ultimate, because that also had
some pretty heavy fence grabbing. So it's between one or two of these events that happened.
Yeah, I'm not seeing. I don't think it was the next one, but it came quickly, and it probably in part came because Gary Goodridge was so good at grabbing the cage. I mean, that was like a big skill of his.
He is a second-degree black belt in cage grabbing.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, and this fight, this was one of those really weird ones where it just suddenly was over.
Yeah,
And
he started hitting him like 4 times. And so I think I wrote down it's like 4 times he hits him in the face, and Big John's like, "No, we're done. We're over. We're done. We're over."
But Campetella did tap. It didn't. It was hard to see it because he kind of threw his arm out there once, and then he got hit a couple times. He threw his arm out, and at the end of his arm he tapped, and that's why John stopped it.
Yeah, I didn't see that on the first time I watched it, so I figured that's what it. I thought it was either an early stoppage, and then eventually they tell us it was the tap out. It was hard to see though, but yeah, I mean.
I noticed it when I watched it. I was like, oh shit, at first I thought he may be verbally submitted, but then when they were showing some of the replays, you could see he is like reaching out to tap, and just while he's getting hit, his body's flailing, so you don't really notice it.
Yeah, and Goodridge manages to sneak out the win, just barely in this case, just because of his ring knowledge, his ability to use the cage effectively. So Gary gets by, and that poor guy is going to have to fight Mark Coleman in the next round.
Yeah, that nobody get. Yeah, you feel bad for Goodridge and Johnston because they both fought like smart, quick fights, really like overwhelmed their competition, and then they have to go up against Don Frye and Mark Coleman.
Yeah, that's right. So our next round will be Don Frye taking on Brian Johnston. Frye, who just fought for 10 minutes, I believe it was. 10 minutes in the cage against a much fresher Brian Johnston. And Goodridge, who fought a pretty easy fight, but mostly got manhandled a lot, so he's probably pretty winded, against Coleman, who had a relatively easier fight as well. So we have a very interesting bracket in the next round. And with that, we're going to take a break here between this, because coming up we're going to have, I believe, a segment you didn't have. We're going to hear from Tank Abbott. He's back, and we're going to continue the event. So I guess we need an outro now for this break here. Maybe instead of you saying, "I got nothing," I say, "I got something" after the next segment. Does that work? Is that good?
Yeah, you got something, man. So we both got something.
That sounded kind of weak. We both got something. Are you sure you got something?
I've got something too. I'm ready. Put me in, coach.
This first it sounded dirty. Now it sounds just weird. It's an awkward cut.
All right. Yeah, we're not going out on a high note here.
No, we're gonna work on this, but yeah, we'll be right back. Check out part 2 for the rest of UFC 10, the tournament. We'll be right back.